short duration on this planet in regards to human evolution and cosmic time that we think these 2D pictures will be the same for eternity, holding hence empirical value. Third, to reintegrate the 2D flaw, if you will, it's only a fixed perception from the planet Earth. If we were viewing these same stars from another side of the Milky Way galaxy from a different angle, they would not represent anything close to the forms we see from here. So, despite the popular culture's interest, which is actually quite romantic, I have to admit, given the deep yearning to understand our place in relationship to the universe, relationship, by the way, which is the most common definition of spirituality, we are only left, however, to realize that in what I will call the expanded dimensional reality, debunking the limited dimensional perception, no different than the surface thinking the world was flat or the sun moved around the earth, but yet most today won't argue those facts as adamantly as they will argue their belief in astrology. Another example of this limited dimensional perception comes from the cultural characteristics of the period of origin of certain ideas. Just as the constellations still today are recognized for their names after spoons and ox carts and scales and common animals, as opposed to space shuttles and TVs and laptops and smartphones, the projections of thought of any point in time can only reflect the state of knowledge at that point in time. It's a dead giveaway. The traditional religious systems of belief, for example, contain the rhetoric not of an advanced technological society or a society of advancements in, say, civil rights or advanced medical treatments. No, it contains the period-based cultural values that occurred thousands of years in the past. Did God invent man or did man invent God? Do the depictions of monotheistic gods appear like us? Why do they? Why do they appear like us? Why do they have tempers like man? Why are they emotional and judgmental and volatile and retributive? Why is it that monotheism is common to desolate desert cultures, while polytheism is common to lush, diverse rainforest cultures? Is it random chance that nearly all the early gods of Greece and Egypt actually related to natural phenomenon? The sun, the moon, the stars, the ocean, water. It's almost as though the minds of those who created these stories and ideas were trying to figure out what the natural world was and what it was doing, and they could only impose their culturally specific ideas upon them as the organism of knowledge continued its evolution. Why are the gods in traditional African religions black and the gods of the West white? Why are the gods of patriarchal societies always male? And why is it that people born into cultures that support these beliefs tend to perpetuate them? How often do you hear of an Arab person born in a Muslim culture magically becoming Jewish as a child? I'm sorry to stand in what could be a controversial opposition to the beliefs of what are really billions of people that ascribe to, say, astrology or theistic religious belief. But when the perceptual context of origin of these belief systems are taken into account, we find a clear, limited dimensional perception, cloaked as relevant through traditional perpetuation, denying the emergent nature of our reality. And this leads me to the true focus of this talk, believe it or not. For the limited dimensional perception, I apologize for the kind of annoying techno jargon, but it's the best I can come up with. This limited dimensional perception I speak of is not limited to these obvious examples. And the very fabric of modern society with respect to our economic, legal, and political system is no different, not to mention the vast number of contemporary value distortions that continue to masquerade as viable, applicable, and hence normal. How many people here are Republicans? How many people here are Democrats?
How many people are Republicans and don't want to say it?
How many people here are independents? How many people here reject all political parties and find the political concept itself as outdated, unscientific, and detrimental to social progress? Wow. All right, let's try another one. How many people here are capitalists? How many people here are socialists? How many people here find such notions to be equally as outdated, arbitrary, and useless with respect to truly efficient economic management? Thank you. Just as people are born into a culture that supports traditional religious belief, tend to conform their values and perpetuate those values without critical thought, so do almost all of us when it comes to our modern social institutions, which we think are intellectually viable and separate from the religious dogma. Let's take, for example, government and politics. Politics in Greek means of, for, or relating to citizens. It's essentially a decision-making method of social operation. And while variance does exist, the most dominant form today is that some kind of representative government where the interests of the people are said to have some expression through the representation. In the United States, for example, we are said to have a constitutional republic. This is basically a form of representative democracy which must govern within the confines of existing constitutional law, which is a fairly rigid set of preconceived declarations that apply not only to the conduct of government, but also to the people. Why not pure democracy? Well, because pure democracy is 100 white men hanging one black man. The originators of this country had a decent intuition about the dangers of crowd mentality. In the words of Thomas Jefferson, a democracy is nothing more than mob rule, where 51% of people may take away the rights of the other 49%. So democracy, for it to be applicable, is really contingent upon the masses being educated about their environment so their votes have quality. And since that's very, 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 very hard to qualify, a benchmark of rights, hence the Constitution, had to be created to enable some form of regulation. I hope that makes sense, because this train of thought is going to carry farther. It's a benchmark. The issue of a benchmark, if you will, as I like to present in this exercise, doesn't just occur with democracy. It's also applicable to the monetary system or the market system of monetary economics, to be specific. Today we have what you call a free market. It has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? It seems to feed the same value association we have regarding democracy, so-called freedom of choice. The free market means that through the movement of money, power and property can be bought and sold, the only limitation being the state of your wealth, hence your purchasing power, the actions of your competitors, and the laws, of course, created to maintain order within the system. And it's the law attribute that I find the most interesting. This is the benchmark, the legislation, or the regulatory game rules, if you will, because it's just a game. This benchmark regulation is inherent in both the free market and democracy, two ideas based, again, upon the broad romantic view of free choice. This, to me, is really interesting. For these benchmarks basically imply some type of third-party, external, empirical reality, don't they? An empirical reality that would have to inherently be absent of some form of choice and freedom for them to exist as they do. Think about that for a moment. It's a contradiction, and this contradiction can be seen as an influence coming from, in my view, the new emergent understandings that arise through the evolution of knowledge. New experience-driven information trying to self-correct prior beliefs through trial and error or through intuitive step-by-step adaptation. In other words, the very foundational premise of democracy and the free market as far as theory is intrinsically flawed, obviously. Something is missing, or many things are missing, because it can't work on its own. It requires influence of a third-party decision process. Democracy is contingent upon an informed public along with certain ever-present rights, which are essentially there because it is assumed that the public doesn't know them, but they should. Likewise, the free market requires third-party rules to maintain order, rules which often, for example, demand certain environmental safeties, pollution protocols, basic efficiency protocols. You know this. I mean, we all know that the system as it stands in the free market, left to its own devices, would use up just about everything, as I will allude to here in a little while. The system can't stand on its own. It will self-destruct. Put another way, These rules are needed to protect the free market and democracy from itself. Otherwise, again, they will self-destruct. As an extended example, if it wasn't for the regulations existing against, say, corporate monopoly, the world would have been taken over by one corporation a long, long time ago. Despite the statistically void, utterly false notions perpetuated by economists that the more free the market, the more efficient, free market competition is one of the most hegemonic concepts ever invented. While mob rule democracy, again continuing our comparison, can generate mass irrationality with no basis in reality, if not properly collared through rights and education. Sorry to drill this in, but it's very important. By the way, I suggest a book called The Crowd, a study of the popular mind. If you want to read about how crowd mentality can override independent thought in a very caustic way, it's well documented that people lose their objectivity and lose their sense of control when involved in mass appeal. And that isn't just, say, for a soccer riot. It happens through the media. It happens through many different forms. So then, what is this benchmark that we keep seeing? What is really being referenced in the broad view? Using the example of rights for democracy and regulation for the free market, what do those two issues really reach for? It reaches for the natural order, or more operationally, scientific causality. That is what is breaching through the concrete. The most dangerous value we can have floating around the culture today, and I hope everyone can really listen carefully to this, the most dangerous value we have floating around the culture today is the idea that any of us have freedom of choice or the right to our own opinion, especially when it comes to issues of human survival and sustainability. We cannot choose, we can only align if we wish to survive and prosper. Period. There is simply no such thing as freedom when the benchmark of scientific causality is brought into the equation with respect to any action or goal. The only caveat is the emergent uncertainty of the evolution of knowledge, which again does require a threshold of flexibility. Why? Because again, we don't know everything. But we do seem to get closer and closer to more empirical understandings as time moves forward. Is there really any freedom to how we organize our economy on a finite planet if the goal is to create the most efficient, sustainable means of production, distribution, and regeneration? No, there isn't. Industry is a technical process, a calculation problem, where the variables of human needs, physical science, and earthly resources are brought into a single regulatory equation, if you will. The properties of our resources can be scientifically quantified now, strategically assessed as far as their purpose, strategically oriented as far as the design in the most logical manner, distributed through the exact same logic of pure efficiency. We have globalization on this planet. What the hell are we doing? We're taking stuff from all over the world, exploiting labor, moving it around, wasting tons of energy, when we could easily develop production methods in local communities where you save X-fold amount of energy. The distance between elements moving is X-fold less. It's insane. But yet, the system perpetuates that. But that's for a larger order subject that I don't have time to go into. We could strategically orient industry, and it's self-evident as we do based on the physics of our reality and where things are. We could enable an efficiency never known before. It becomes self-evident. And why would we possibly, with regard to sustainability, want to do anything less? As counterintuitive and culturally obtuse as it may seem, there is no freedom or opinion in our technical reality. There is only the most efficient way up until now, and the rest is simply inefficient. The definition of economy in Greek means management of a household. A reduction of waste and maximized efficiency is inherent in this premise.